And for more on the Supreme Court's decision and Trump's visit to Michigan later today, let's turn to Republican political consultant Jason Cabel Roe. Jason, thanks for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So let's start with the ban on bump stocks. It was put in place during Trump's presidency. That was in 2017, following the mass shooting at a Las Vegas concert, as you well know. What do you make of the Supreme Court's decision to now strike down that ban?
I have to concede I was surprised, particularly the lopsided 6-3 vote on it. Obviously, gun control and mass shootings have been somewhat of an epidemic in America over the last couple decades. I think the scale of them, the number of them that have happened in the last few years clearly have, Americans concerned about safety in public. But, the court's decision was that the ATF had exceeded its authority. And, the ban on machine guns that goes back many decades, and what the bump stock does, which is take a semi-automatic weapon, which, an automatic weapon, you just pull the trigger and it shoots consistently without you releasing. A semi-automatic, you've got to pull the trigger each time. And so the bump stock allows a simulated pulling of the trigger repeatedly to ultimately end up behaving like a machine gun. So I think it's kind of a distinction without a difference. And it's interesting that the court went that route, but that even moderate members of the conservative majority went along with it. It is an interesting decision by the court.
I agree with you. I think a lot of people were taken back by this decision. President Biden now appealing to Congress to introduce legislation that would permanently ban bump stocks. And thank you again for explaining exactly what that does to a weapon. So if Trump is reelected in November, do you expect him to push for a federal ban as well?
Well, I think that's unlikely. The Second Amendment community in America, the NRA, have been pretty vocal supporters of President Trump.
Yeah.
He is not one that does things because they're politically popular. He tends to do the things that he wants to do. And I think in this case, I would not expect him to take the lead on something like that. What would be interesting, and I do think that Republicans will take over the House and the Senate. Do Republicans take this up? I think that's a question. And if it lands on his desk, does he sign it or veto it?
Let's head to Detroit, Michigan, where Trump is holding a campaign event. Jason, he won Michigan in 2016 narrowly against Hillary Clinton, but then he lost by less than 160,000 votes in 2020 to President Biden. That state has been flip-flopping. So why does Trump think he can now take back Michigan, especially realizing what happened just 4 years ago?
Well, I think, Michigan for Trump really was a crowning achievement. Before his win in 2016, a Republican presidential candidate hadn't won the state since 1988. So we're talking about 28 years. So it has been an elusive state for Republicans. But I think this realignment of the traditional coalitions in the two parties, in which the elites now are represented by the Democratic Party and the middle and working class are represented by the Republican Party. I think Trump is largely responsible for that realignment. And nowhere did you see that more clearly than in Michigan in 2016. And even though he barely lost in 2020, I think in that election as well, I think you look at Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and other Rust Belt states, he has been particularly, I think, effective for Republicans in redefining who the Republican Party is. I also think what he has going for him this time is Joe Biden and just the awful presidency and the economic impact that is affecting all Americans at every level of the economic ladder. And I think the problems that Biden has within his coalition are more exaggerated in Michigan than anywhere. We have the largest Arab American Muslim community in America. Probably about 100,000 votes just reflected in that community alone. His weakness with the youth vote. A New York Times Siena poll just showed that they're virtually tied amongst voters 18 to 29, which doesn't even seem conceivable, given Biden won that demographic by 24 points in 2020. You see openings within the Black community. One of the events that President Trump is doing today is with Black pastors and Black leaders in Metro Detroit to talk about how Trump how Biden has failed on economic issues, and it's disproportionately affecting the Black community. So when you can't hold your own base and significant segments of your coalition in a state you narrowly won, you are in big, big trouble. And I think it's going to be hard for Biden to come back here.
You make a lot of good points. The economic ladder for Americans, the Muslim vote in Michigan. So what do you think Trump's messaging should be today when he visits the state to voters, including those blue-collar workers?
I think it's going to be focused on the economy. I think it's going to be inflation. It's going to be grocery prices. It's going to be gas prices. I know there was a report came out that grocery prices have increased yet again, and gas prices are on the rise, as they typically are in the summer. But, you know, these are pretty acute problems. And I think one of the problems with the elites that keep telling Americans that, no, the economy is great, is that most Americans that are not in the upper income segments of the economy are suffering. I mean, if you are wealthy, increases in gas prices and groceries and, you know, home energy costs, you can absorb those without affecting your life. If you're someone that has a fixed budget, who is on a limited income, marginal increases, let alone significant increases in those basic necessities for a household, have a debilitating impact on your life. And so, well, there's a few economic indicators that, you know, Democrats can point to and say, oh, things are good. Mm-hmm. The ones that most Americans actually feel are not good. And I think that is a big headwind for Joe Biden going into the election in 4 months.
And we hear that from Americans every single day on this show. Jason Cabel Roe, we appreciate your insight, sir. Thank you for joining us.